Good afternoon to everybody online. You probably haven't had a session yet where you're coming through and viewing somebody right now in a completely different format. So what you're seeing on your screen is actually a live classroom. We're here in South Florida, and we're at an amazing school in South Florida, a charter school that has some of our kids here, some students here. Say hello, students. There we go. And we have a teacher in here. Say hello to Miss Alonzo.
Hi.
There we go. And we even have the principal over here.
Hello.
Right. So what we're doing today is Sherry Hage and myself, as co-founders of Launched Solutions, are here to talk today about some of the things that are going on in the new world of education and education solutions to make things work better, given all the realities of COVID. And so hopefully you guys can hear us. We're using our masks or socially distanced today. And at the same time, we thought it'd be really important to come live to you, wherever you are, to show a real classroom in action. These kids were in school all day today, so thanks students for staying after school a little bit. We're all going to get extra credit or something like that. I don't know what that'll include, but they're here to answer some questions in a few minutes, and along with the teacher. But we also wanted to tell you about what the mobile classroom looks like, and more importantly, what we think education in the future is going to look like, because this is the beginning of a long trend. This is not just going to be because of what's happening with COVID. This is also going to happen in the future. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Sherry to maybe outline this in some historical ways.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here with us today. We do want to talk about education, the future of education, where we've been, where we're headed, and really think through what our educational delivery should be looking like today. As we all know, if we look at our first data slide, for the past several years, we've been looking at our student performance. And when we start looking at the student performance and where we've been, we see that in the last several months, based on COVID, we are beginning to see a trend down in our student performance. We're seeing some learning gaps, unfortunately, like we've not seen before. So before, as an educator, we were always worried about that summer slide in the middle there, when our students went home and had a couple of months off and came back to school. This year, what we see on this first data slide is showing us that COVID is having a major impact on our students. And what we're seeing is a decline in their learning, which is very, very, very scary to educators. So as we think through and look at the last several years of spending in the United States in education, we begin to see some gaps down here around our technology spends. And unfortunately, if you look, the average annual spend for student technology is about $100 per student. And when you think through where we were back in March and everyone needing to respond to a pandemic, and how do we educate our students, and how do we begin to use an environment that is fluid and mobile in order to continue that learning for our kids in a healthy way, in a safe way, $100 per student just isn't going to get us there. And if we also look at the other piece right here that's concerning, we are spending on average about $200 per employee. That's not just teachers, that's staff, that's everyone in the building. And so we began to look at some data points around the COVID impact. We began to look at the spend. And then if we look at prolonged school closures and remote learning here, there's a couple of things on this slide that we need to stop and think about. One is the average student learning loss between March and May, on average, for the average student, was about a half a year's loss of learning. If we look at our low-income students, that gap became greater, and there was about a 1 year learning gap for our students. So this translates up into this data to look at the lifelong impact of COVID and lack of learning and loss of learning on the lives of our kids today. And if we think about that, what they're beginning to see is about a 9% impact per year on our students' income over their lifetime. So we start thinking about how education and how lack of learning and how loss of learning is impacting our children and our families today. It is a lifelong impact unless we as educators really begin to think differently about how we're educating our kids, about how we're delivering quality instruction to ensure that we are pushing forward with educating our students. So with that, that's just a few data points around what we've seen. And the last one I wanted to quickly look at is the national iReady data. And our students take iReady, a lot of students across the country do. But if you look at this, what was concerning to us to begin to have to push forward and think differently about our delivery of instruction in the classroom is we are beginning to see the fall 2020 data, our fall baseline data that came out, shows the percentage of students 2 or more grade levels below. And when you look at that, and you look at the 3-year average of that, this year in 2020, we were so much further ahead with students that are at least 2 grade levels below. That's very, very alarming in terms of we've got an achievement gap that is growing greater. We are not closing that achievement gap as we are committed to doing. So we really had to begin to think differently about what that education can and should look like for our kids in this world. As we think about our world and the transition we've all made, our world is a mobile world. We are all on devices. We are able to work from our cars, unfortunately, which we shouldn't be doing, from our homes, from anywhere. And so how do we begin to think about creating that same mobile environment for our students and families so that we are bringing education to them where they are and able to really educate them in a way that takes them into those job skills necessary for 2030 and beyond. So with that, John, why don't you talk about a little bit about what we created in terms of the mobile classroom?
Well, so listen, that's amazing, Sherry, and the data points are really hard to accept in some ways because progress has been made. If you go back to the work that was done by Governor Bush 20 years ago in Florida to set up standards, to set up performance outcomes, to measure results, to invest more in literacy and math, we've seen much progress here in Florida that the whole country has followed. But the fact is that right now, COVID is challenging even the most affluent neighborhoods and families, and everyone is being impacted by this. And the fact is that it's hard to admit and to say, but even the best teachers are struggling if they don't have tools and resources that are innovative for the new world. So honestly, during the March timeframe in April, Sherry and I were in quarantine with our family like everybody else. We were all locked down at home. And it came to us, it was obvious that we needed to think about how do we do this differently? What do we do in a classroom to make the classroom itself a more vibrant learning environment? How do we take technology and integrate it so that actually the way that the teacher teaches doesn't feel so remote? And the fact is that when we went to virtual learning, you know, virtual learning has significant gaps in it. At the end of the day, I know my kids, our kids, they didn't really like virtual learning that much. They wanted to come back to school. Everybody wants in-person learning. But the truth is that in-person learning right now is not practical or available to all students. And so as that's happening to the world, we have to think about how can we create a different classroom model that actually allows for virtual and blended and all the other thinking that's been going on differently. And you can't just think about that from an instructional point of view. Oh, I hate these math, sorry. You have to think about them from a view of how does a teacher interface with students, and how do students interface with each other, and how do they interface back with the teacher? And the gap has really been around that. It's not around the curriculum components. All of our curriculum was already digital and it was transferable, and teachers seamlessly went over within a week during March, and kids were at home and learning continued, but it wasn't the same quality. The difference now is that because of the way we thought about the classroom, we actually set the classroom up differently so it would actually work differently. So you're coming to us today through a device. In this case, it was a research project that we put together to figure out the best audio-visual device. We thought about the best software. We thought about the best integration between these devices, the software, the smartboard. Some of these devices were already in a classroom. Most classrooms have smartboards, not all, but most do. You know, classrooms are often set up just like you see here. But what we didn't have is we didn't have a seamless way where teachers and students could learn, whether they're in a classroom, maybe down the hallway in another classroom because they have to be separated from each other, or maybe down in the lunchroom or at home. So the concept really is, how do we integrate and produce a mobile classroom where the classroom comes to kids wherever they are, and that kids don't just always have to come to the classroom. We want to make the classroom alive.
The other thing we have to think about is, in this new world and this environment, we have to think about, how do we train our teachers? How do we train our leaders to make sure that that instruction is quality instruction and that they do have those tools and resources, but not that it's just that they have them, but that they know how to use them. So that training became a key component of what we went into in March, April, May, as we were closing out the school year. We were also gearing up to say, things are going to look different. Things are going to have to look different in this new world. And so how can we prepare people? How can we support them with the training that they needed to be successful in the mobile environment?
So a couple things that you might be interested in learning about the mobile classroom. First of all, the mobile classroom is the idea that anytime, anywhere, the learning that takes place in a classroom can be synchronous, meaning at the same time you're listening, I'm speaking, or asynchronous, meaning that we can record lessons and actually bring them back up. So one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute is that the best teachers can actually create lessons like we have right here, and those can be used later by her or other teachers, and then the sharing can take place. It also means that a teacher in the height of COVID, in some cases, came back to an empty classroom, and they were literally teaching from a classroom, but the classroom wasn't being instructed, the instruction wasn't happening through a laptop with a small camera and kids all around. It was happening with that teacher in a classroom where there's a mobile system where that wherever she or he moves and walks and talks, it follows them. So in this case, wherever I go in the classroom, cameras can follow me. It'll push over here, it'll push over there. It'll break it down into different quadrants so we can actually have subsections. A student can speak and another student can speak. And you can see the different kids. You can see the kids at home. You can see the kids here. And that interface starts to provide a visual marketplace, a place where people feel like they're part of the class, even if you're not physically here. And so engagement really matters. Engagement really matters. And so when you're in a remote learning environment, how you engage matters as much as what you engage with, because we know that engagement levels have dropped when people went to virtual learning. We also know that we instituted the mobile classroom modeling, that engagement went up dramatically, and we saw that students and even families engaged more often.
Yeah, you can even use this in small groups, so teachers can still provide that small group instruction, and our online students can still be part of that small group instruction. I also want to come back to what Jon said a minute ago, which is it does expand the reach of your great teachers, right? And so when you've got great teachers providing great lessons and you can post them, then you can really look at using a flipped classroom model where the kids are going to those lessons online, they're learning the material, then they're coming back into the classroom through the mobile environment, and they are extending that learning through that small group instruction. So you can use this system, this mobile classroom, multiple ways. And as Jon also said, that engagement piece, getting that connection with students and families is key if we are going to see them be engaged from that mobile environment.
Two other key things that it does allow for the real-time performance that goes on every day in schools to be measured more actively. Meaning, you know, when you wait till the end of the year for a test, sometimes that test becomes the only test. We think that the work that's being done with the technology providers we're working with the seamless integration, allows assessment to take place on a daily and weekly level that's integrated into every day, rather than waiting to an end-of-year high-stakes test. And finally, it changes seat time. What do I mean by that? It means that right now, most states, most places, only pay a school for how long you actually sit in this classroom. So the money that comes to this school doesn't necessarily come here if half the time you're at home and half the time you're here. Now, it works that way during a COVID pandemic because most governors, including our governor here in Florida, have put out executive orders to ensure that the funding would stay the same during this pandemic. But the fact is that at some point the pandemic goes away. And this idea is built to be post-COVID, so that what happens is in the future, whether you're in school for all day, part of the day, or at home sick, or maybe you're on a field trip, or wherever you are, you don't miss something and get really stuck behind. How many students, for example, raise your hand, know that when you are out of school for a couple of days, you feel like you get behind a little bit, right? You feel like you miss them. No matter how much homework sent home or whatever, you feel like you get left out, right? The whole concept here is that no matter where you are, you're not left out of this process.
And the other thing that we haven't talked about is how this helps administrators actually do the things like observations, evaluations, coaching and mentoring. So we've built a coaching and mentoring program where people can go into the classroom virtually, and then they are looking at videos, they're sharing ideas, and they're coaching and mentoring right through the mobile classroom, where we can then be providing that support that teachers so desperately need right now when they are feeling that crunch of online students, at-home students, in-person students. What do I do? This is also a tool that helps with that coaching and mentoring so that teachers get that support they need.
So with that, I want to just show you physically how the classroom's set up, and then hand it back to Sherry to ask our great teacher and some of our students some questions. In this case, we have a camera system. This one's called the OWL, and we utilize this because it has a 360 camera at the top that you can see the entire classroom. It also has cameras around it that wherever I go in the classroom, it follows me, and a teacher speaks when a student speaks. We also have a teacher here that has a headset on, and she can show you that. Miss Alonzo, if you'll speak, it'll come on.
1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Digress.
There he is.
So there you go. So wherever she goes, that follows her. Now she can also hear at home a student who has a question without that student interrupting with the class.
Correct.
So she can allow for a student to interface with her, say, hold on a second, we'll get right back to you on that. She can also allow the student to speak in the class. So you can start to have tools that are available to a teacher that were never available before to seamlessly interface with students wherever they are. The other thing I think that's really been helpful is that the way it's been plugged in and used. So what happens is when the mobile classroom comes to you in a box, basically it's a plug-in. It immediately adapts with the software, the LMS, and the SIS that you use in your school, and is available for you to move through almost immediately. We do provide professional development with that, and that information really does help. So this oftentimes sits on a stand. It might go right here in the front of the classroom. It might go to the side. Everybody seems to love these things. They name them. They give them a name. And let's just be honest. A year ago, before COVID, how many teachers would have raised their hand and said, hey, please put a camera in the middle of my classroom and all that? Because that would have seemed kind of like infringing. And what are you looking at? Why are you following me? And today they're begging for these. Why? Because it helps give them tools and resources to teach the kids anywhere, anytime. And it helps make them become like university professors. Because this is not technology that hasn't been used in higher ed, but we just took it all, put it together with the right software, the right hardware, and the right training, and then plugged it into some AI and some other components that help make it a useful tool for teachers so that the learning can be a better experience. At the end of the day, this is beyond remote learning. This is beyond being just at a virtual or in person. This is giving you anytime, anywhere learning that's available only because of, quite frankly, COVID. You know, COVID's been tough. It's been hard. It's not easy for us to go through this, but it also has created for us an opportunity to thrive, not just survive, right? So when hard times happen, we don't want to just say, oh, you know, let's just try to keep on doing it the way we were doing it, even if it's failing. That's not what we do. We dig in, we think, we get entrepreneurial, and we figure out new ways to educate kids and support teachers. So with that, Sherry,
That's
I
the
thought,
powerful part of it, right, John? It's the idea that you're looking at data that says, what do we need to do to make sure that our kids don't lose the learning, that we're actually building the knowledge that they need to be successful in life. And so you have to begin to stack up and say, okay, what tools and resources do we need to put in that classroom to ensure the success of the teacher, so the teacher can ensure that the learning progression is still continuing. And so that has been a project, but it's been really fun to watch the innovation. Teachers are creative by nature. They love to think outside the box. And so you start having these really good conversations about the data, about looking and ensuring that our kids are making the progress they need to make. And then you unleash this group of people who are really passionate about ensuring success for kids. And that becomes a lot of fun. So Ms. Alonso, come up here with us for just a minute. You move that owl so we don't fall here.
Yes.
So why don't you talk to us a little bit about how the mobile classroom, how the tools that you've been given has changed your ability to teach students and connect with kids, both in your classroom, those who chose in person, and those who are online or in the mobile environment.
I think one of the best things we've gotten is with all the systems that we have and the different platforms that we use, they integrate very well together. With the OWL camera in our classrooms, we're able to kind of bring a little bit of that classroom environment to the kids at home, where they can see the classroom, where they can hear each other, they can see each other. The kids in the classroom can also see the kids at home. You put your board up and everybody in the meeting is on there. It gives me the ability to share my screen. If I'm showing a movie, I can show it at the same time to the kids at school and to the kids at home. Lessons can also be shared. I can use my whiteboards. I can use my boards that are here, and the kids at home can use it. The cool thing about the OWL that we do have is that I can control it with my phone. So if I want to be able to walk around, but I want it to stay on the front board, I can control it to where it stays there, so the kids can keep taking notes while I continue to walk around and talk, and it will not follow me. So that doesn't leave them, so that the OWL doesn't follow me and leave the kids at home in a lurch, while the kids still have the advantage of watching the board. Everyone can still watch the board and still see my notes on the board while I walk around and talk.
We've talked about a lot of advantages that this has brought into your classroom. Can you think of anything specific, feedback from parents or from students that really just warmed your heart to say, you know what, that made a difference for that child?
I think for them, it's the ability to, I have, funny story, like I have kids, and you can tell sometimes when kids aren't engaged a little bit easier with the systems that we have now, to where sometimes I'll see a student that's just not engaged, and I can call them into a separate chat. And I can say, what are you doing? Why aren't you on task? And they'll be honest and they'll say, I was drawing, I'm sorry. And so that to me, and that was endearing because I love the honesty, and it gives me that ability.
Right.
For the kids, so you call them to a separate chat, they're honest with you, you tell them, just get back on task, buddy, come on, you can do it. And they go right back into the meeting, and you can see that they're engaged again.
So
and that's the heartwarming part.
It helps provide that connection.
Yes, absolutely. You don't lose the connection
Right.
with the student, yeah.
Right. All right. So students, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Raise your hand if any of you have had a time when you've been home during this pandemic and you were having to be online in the mobile environment from your house. Oh, wow. All of you have. Wow. Okay. Well, who wants to come up here with me and explain kind of what you felt or how it worked for you? Come on. I know you're not going to be shy. All right. Come on. Come on up.
8th grade student body president.
8th grade student body president. Share your name. And
Well, my name is Sebastian Castro. I'm the student government president. And the question.
so the question was, you've been home
Right.
and having to log into the mobile environment.
Okay.
How did that help you? What was good about it? What helped you be successful when you had to do your learning from home?
Well, I mean, the display with the OWL, I can see the notes in great quality, and the audio is just great.
Speak up.
And
Speak
all
nice
that.
and loud for them.
You got it. So, the quality, of seeing my teachers, especially when I'm at home, it just feels like I'm right at school. I get the same learning experience with the OWL, and it's just been a great experience, honestly. And sometimes I'll feel distracted, but my teachers, like Mr. Alonso said, get back on track, and that will motivate me to get back on track and do my work. So.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to share something that, how you felt at home in that environment and what was working for you, or one more? All right, come on, thank you. Nice and loud for everybody.
So it's like we're like all in this together. If something's not working, then our teachers like really are so eager to help like fix it, and it's like so nice. And yeah, like it's so nice like that we're all doing this and going through this together, and we're not alone. So, yeah.
Nice, thank you. All right. Now, any other comments from a principal's perspective? I would ask you, what was the implementation like? And what were some of the challenges and things that you as a principal had worked through with your staff?
Well, I mean, I think the training aspect of it, everything was new, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just venturing down this road of just so many new platforms, so many new technologies coming forward, just getting 70 plus years of education in 3 months, how do we change everything, right? How do we innovate in such a short period of time and provide the right training for the comfort levels? Because everybody, you're with change, sometimes we're a little skeptical of it. So just getting everyone to adopt it and see it as an extension of their classrooms. That way we could transcend this classroom into the homes and vice versa.
Right. Thank you very much. And John, I will kick it back over to you.
Well, thank you. And so I think what we tried to do today in a live streaming way is give you guys online watching and those in the classroom and everywhere an understanding of what can take place even during a pandemic. So yes, safety is number one, but also innovation has to come to the forefront. I think one of the biggest challenges during hard times is to get your mindset. I think you taught on this, Sherry, earlier this year to a lot of our leaders around the country, because we don't just help design, build, and create new innovations. We run schools across the country, and because of that, we get to learn all the time what's changing people's mindset. And you just mentioned this. The fact is that the biggest challenge to integrating new thinking and innovation and technology into a classroom is us. I mean, it's really us. It's convincing teachers. It's convincing administrators. It's convincing people who finance these projects at a state level or a school level. It's convincing even students and parents, right? That what we're doing isn't just gimmickry. It's not just made to be cool. It's actually built to enhance and provide something better. So I think what we have to always remember during hard times is that innovation and opportunity, there's an old saying, right? And that is that invention comes from necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? It's the creator of it. And that's kind of what's happened during this time, is that we are all put in a whole place that no one ever expected to be. No one could have predicted this a year ago. But now we're here, and the question is, what can we use during this time to learn from it that can take us well beyond COVID? Someday COVID will go away. At what point that goes away, I think, and you I think you would think too, this is the kind of information and technology and the way that we're learning and teaching that's going to last well beyond COVID. In fact, everything we're doing here is ultimately to make learning more portable for you, just like it would be portable for anything else. I have a cell phone like everybody else here has a cell phone, and let's just be honest, that thing has so much power on it. You can look at anything, you can find anything, you can do anything on the time. But the fact is that most of the time that goes away in a drawer when we walk into a school, and that's not being utilized. But if we were integrating that so that the students can go outside of school, because anytime, anywhere learning means sometimes you're at home and you want to go back and repeat what was going on in class today. Maybe you didn't hear Miss Alonso when she was going through a certain equation on the board and you missed that. You can go back now because of this technology and the way it's integrated and actually bring it right back up, look at that lesson, reflect on it, and make sure you're ready for tomorrow. Because how many times when you go home before this did you say, man, I didn't get that note. I missed that. I might have been out right then. I just went to the restroom for a second, and you literally missed that. Now this makes sure you don't miss that. And then ultimately the goal is to close the COVID gap. The gap that Mrs. Hage talked about earlier, which is the gap between where we should be and where we are because of so much remote learning going on. And the fact is that this helps close that gap. It mitigates that gap. It starts to create useful ways for administrators and technology people and for teachers and students to actually start learning and teaching differently. And I think that's the future, what's exciting. The exciting future is that this is just the beginning. So the mobile classroom isn't just a learning, it's not just a camera. It's not just an audio visual. It's not just the LMS and the SIS and a laptop. It's the integration of all of that through the best ways to learn and to teach. And that's what's exciting about it because we're taking those big steps.
Well, I think you said it earlier, John, right? It's about learning to thrive in this environment and how do we continue to press forward with closing that achievement gap and making sure that our students are on track for lifelong learning. I think that's key. And I think it was in the implementation too. It was about creating that hope. It was about creating hope for families that we were going to continue to educate their children. We were not going to let them fall behind. It was about creating hope for our teachers, that we were there to support them, that we were there to care about them, and that we were gonna walk through this together. It was about creating hope in terms of our world. People need to see us more united, more together, working to ensure that the children in our society today actually move forward and do not lose because of where we find ourselves in the current circumstance. So great educators diving in to be innovative, to be creative, to think differently, and quite frankly, do some things that they've wanted to do for a long time. They just were bound by some constraints that didn't allow it. And so this opportunity with the mobile classroom, we've seen our teachers stand up and say, look what I have accomplished with my kids. We've seen U.S. history teachers stand up and say, look at how well my students are doing because I've had these resources and these tools put into my toolbox. And so that is exciting to create that hope, to create that opportunity, and really see students continue both in person and in the mobile world, mobile environment, to be prepared for that 2030 job skills that we all talk about them needing. We cannot lose sight of the fact that we can't let our children fail.
So with that, I thought maybe it would be good if we wanted to answer any questions that for those who are watching online. I know there's a chat box there. You also can learn more about Launched Solutions at launchedsolutions.com. It's basically our version of what is going to happen post-COVID in educational teaching and learning, and integrating the right best technology, integrating the right professional development, and the right tools and resources. So this is what we're doing to move the ball. This is the way we see education going in the future, and so we're ready to answer any questions from anybody if they have any online. While we're waiting for that and see if anybody has a question, kids, students, are there any things that you think we could be thinking about, right, as we continue to make this better? Because this is a process where we're going to need teachers around the country that are going to get involved in this already. We have over 10,000 teachers that are part of this process. So what do you as students think could make it even better for you guys? What would be something, that you think would be useful?
Maybe making it, because our teachers are, supporting us through all of this. They're getting us our education, inexpensive sometimes themselves. Maybe just making it easier for them, and maybe just giving more thanks to them because they feel like they've been overshadowed for a while.
That's a great point, because our art teachers especially, right? Because if you think about it, but all teachers, right? Teachers, let's just make a shout out on that for a second. So that's a really great point, and I love that. So Miss Alonzo represents one of thousands of teachers around the country, tens of thousands who have actually they're our frontline workers. They're our heroes. And so I think sometimes we forget that, yes, we have heroes that are sitting in hospitals helping people and people on the front line in many other ways, but teachers that have stepped up during this pandemic, teachers that have said, we're not quitting on kids, we're going to do more for them, teachers that said, whatever it takes, they actually are the big heroes, and we want to give a shout out to them.
Thank you very much.
Great point. And I think we do sometimes forget that, right? Because it's not been easy when all this happened, and it has not been, but Thank you for that. Any other things that you guys want to maybe bring up as an idea or a thought as you integrated this and you worked through this process in schools? How can we make it better for you guys? How could you learn even more? Okay, so what we're going to do, was there one question here? Okay, we have a question.
Yes, the question is, do you think the mobile classroom will continue well beyond COVID, or do you see classrooms going back to the traditional model?
That's a great question. Ms. Hage, you want to answer?
Well, I think that there is a lot going on with the mobile classroom that we haven't explored yet. Like I said, one of the areas that will continue, at least for us, is the idea of coaching and mentoring, and actually being able to be in that classroom while that teacher is teaching and providing then that feedback along the way. Because really, if we want to get to great teaching in classroom, we're going to have to grow our teachers and grow their capacity. So we've got to invest in them. And using this platform is a great way to continue to invest in our teachers and provide that coaching and mentoring. I will also say that it has been very helpful in supporting our families that have not been able to come into our buildings. And I think that that's a long-term view of what will continue post-COVID, is being able to engage those families from where they are, and not just have that phone call, but be able to have that interactive environment. I know we've also had parents that have wanted to log in and watch the lessons and learn right along with their students. So some of those great best practices will continue well beyond COVID. And I'm sure there's 10 more that will come up along the way as we continue to learn and build out this platform.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I think the other things that go beyond COVID are things like the data that's going to start coming out of this. You're going to start to see engagement data. Before, you didn't really measure engagement, you measured attendance. And I think attendance is going to move towards engagement. There's ways through the technology that we can start to know, whether you're here or at home or anywhere, are you really engaged? Are you responding? Like we just talked about with Ms. Alonso, she's able to tap right into one student and say, hey, I see you're not really paying attention. What's going on? I mean, that wasn't something available before. So I do think that we're going to see higher engagement levels. I think we're going to see a more customized, personalized learning model. We've been doing personalized learning plans for how long, Sherry? 15, 20 years. But the fact is that until now, you didn't have the kind of interface like the mobile classroom does to personalize these learning things, so that if you're a student who's a little bit faster paced and you want to get ahead, that is going to be the future that we'll be able to customize. Because why? We'll have that repository of lessons that you can use and kind of go at your pace, which will really make it better too.
Well, and I think your focus on the data is right too. Like we're already looking at data coming out that says, how are we doing with our students who are in that mobile environment? How are we doing with our students that are in person? What is the difference? What's working the best for those mobile students? How are we engaging them? But more importantly, if they're engaged, they're performing. So how are we assessing the growth, the learning, the knowledge being gained in that mobile environment, which I think is key to begin to move to every student's growth and individualized instruction and performance, and not just that one test at the end of the year, but really gauging that learning over the course of time. So I think that's a great point.
And one last, and I know we have another question, that is, the other point I'll make is, not every teacher is great at everything. So it's just like we're all better at some things than other things, just like you might be, right? You might be better at sports or art or music or whatnot. And so what we want to be able to do through this as well is let our best teachers thrive, because we're now giving them tools that they can use to educate a lot more children and in a more effective way, and then allow the other teachers to do what they do as well best. So we're already thinking through some of those things. These are all post-COVID ways that this mobile classroom.
Educational best practice,
right.
Really.
A couple other great questions, two-part. What can policymakers do to help elevate the mobile classroom? And how can parents, and should they engage in this effort towards more innovation?
Okay, so I'll speak to the policy, and then Sherry can speak to maybe the parent side. I would say that policymakers have an opportunity to really look at what's happened during COVID, where they have made seat time more flexible, where they have made performance outcomes more flexible, and to reform those policies specifically. So right now, like I explained before, the money follows the student most of the time, but if you're not in school most of the time, then the money doesn't flow. And so what we have to think about is that the physical classroom is no longer the only way to be in school. Being in school is being engaged in school. It's being involved in learning. And so whether you're in the physical classroom or in this case, the mobile classroom coming to you wherever you are, that should be considered a way to be funding schools and to supporting teachers and quite frankly, even paying teachers. I think the way we can incentivize this is to actually design models where the teachers who are the most innovative, who are ready to do the things that are actually working for students, we can find ways to pay them more and take care of them even better. Because if they're doing a great job, don't we want to take care of our teachers because they do a great job for us, right? And so the last thing I'd say in the policy is that I think the performance outcomes, the data, are ultimately going to change the way we value and evaluate students and performance, and even professionals, even evaluating each other. So I think we now have tools that we never had before to do outcome-based assessment.
So what was the parent question? Sorry.
How can parents be engaged in this effort towards innovation?
So we have run, in many of our schools, we've run parent engagement chats, trying to think about helping them create the right environment where they have to be local. Getting those parents to give us the feedback on what is working for their child, what is not working for their child, letting them be part of the environment, just like the students are during the day, for those parents that can't come up to the school for whatever reason, to be involved in the various events. So we are trying to get parents to get engaged. We've done everything from give hotspots, give computers, provide for them all the ability for them to be part of what we're trying to accomplish through the mobile classroom. Our students just took surveys about what was working, what was not working, what we need to do better. So again, just trying to get information from them about how they learn best, about how they can be involved. And that's really how you're going to build this idea of students owning their learning. Because as we all know as educators, the student has got to begin to own their learning. They've got to begin to set goals and be able to achieve those goals and be able to work through what are the next steps. And I think in a mobile environment, we really are able and have this huge opportunity in front of us to prepare our kids for the job skills they need to be successful in 2030. We need to be incorporating that into our environment now with the goal setting, with the feedback loops, so that we understand how we can continue to improve to close that achievement gap for kids and include parents and include all the stakeholders in the process.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone who tuned in today. This session was recorded, so we can also have it later and watch. I want to thank our students so much for being here.
Thank you.
I want to thank our amazing teacher, Ms. Alonzo. Thank you so much. I want to thank our principal, Mr. Jackson. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank Sherry because honestly, she's the educator. I'm more the policy wonk. Together, I think this has been a great process so far. We're excited. This is the beginning of a journey. If you're online and you're watching or you want to learn more, go to launchsolutions.com, call us, talk to us. We'd like to show you what we're trying to do. We'd like for you to be a pilot with us. Let's get your teachers involved. Let's think outside the box together because this is for everybody. So thank you so much. I want to thank finally Governor Jeb Bush and the Foundation for Educational Excellence. They do the best policy work in the country on helping reformers and people who are dedicated to outcomes, excellent outcomes in schools to do big thinking. So I want to thank them as well, and we're proud to be a part of the team. Have a great day, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.